Well, good evening, and thank you all so much for taking the time to come out tonight. I know how busy everybody's schedule is, and I will just say that I am actually honored to be here at an inaugural meeting of a Tea Party group. You know, a lot of people, when they use the term Tea Party, don't say it in a very positive way. And let me just say that I've traveled the state now, and I've had the opportunity to meet so many people just like yourselves here tonight, in this room tonight, and in rooms just like this all across the state. And I can tell you this, you're not extremists. You are people who care about the future of this country just like I do, and who want to make sure that we can restore America's promise for our children and for our grandchildren. Now the secret's out. The secret's out that most people know that I have officially opened an exploratory committee to challenge Bill Nelson for the United States Senate in 2012. And I have been traveling the state by myself. I do have one companion, and it's my Garmin GPS system. And I could not have been more pleased tonight when I was driving here to the Civic Center. I was driving here tonight, and the Garmin said, "Turn right on Ronald Reagan Avenue." So even the Garmin shares the appreciation for our president. Now, people ask me all the time, why are you thinking about running for United States Senate? And I can tell you this, I did not have a 5-year plan like any politicians do as it relates to what's the next office they're going to run for. I served 8 years in the Florida House of Representatives. I'm from Palm Beach County, from Boca Raton, where I can tell you this, it's not as easy to be a conservative Republican in Palm Beach. But I never had to compromise my principles. I remained a true conservative, even when it wasn't popular. And Marco Rubio in 2007 tapped me to serve as the majority leader of the Florida House of Representatives, where we fought for conservative principles and conservative ideas. And everybody remembers at that point in time, Charlie Crist's approval ratings were in the 70s. And Charlie Crist was saying, the best way to beat the Democrats is for us to join them. He tried to drive the Republican Party to the middle. And I said, no, we don't need to be less partisan as Republicans. We need to be more principled. And that is exactly how I feel today. Even then, when it wasn't popular, people knew that they could count on me to stand firm for those ideals and beliefs that we all share. And so as I've been traveling the state and being able to meet so many people like yourself and have this conversation, I have been energized. Because while some people might say that the Tea Party movement and all of the other groups that are part of this movement were a flash in the pan and they're going to disappear, I've got news for them. This movement isn't going anywhere. It is only getting stronger. It is getting more energized and more educated. And it's thanks to so many people like yourselves in this room who want to make sure that we fight to take back Washington and take back our country. 2010 was so very special. But it was only the beginning. It was only the first step in making sure that we can restore America's promise. 2012 is when we must send the reinforcements to Washington to get the job done. Because the message is quite simply this: enough is enough. We want our leaders to tell it like it is, and if they are not going to get the job done, then we are going to find those that will. Now, from my perspective, what I would share with you is that Bill Nelson can no longer cover up his liberal voting record with a Southern accent and a charming smile. But we cannot begin to turn this country around until we take back control of the United States Senate and until we make Barack Obama a one-term president. I'm often reminded about what Abraham Lincoln had to say. Abraham Lincoln reminded us that America is far too strong to be destroyed from the outside. But if we falter, it will be because we fail from within. and we're doing it to ourselves. America is spending money that we simply do not have, and we are bankrupting our nation both fiscally and morally. We have annual deficits in excess of $1.5 trillion. We have a national debt now in excess of $14 trillion. And I'm not sure that everyone in Washington, including even some Republicans, have gotten the message. Cut the spending, stop the borrowing, balance the budget, and attack the debt. Right now, we have some Republicans who are thinking too much about the political consequences of what may happen if there's a short-term government shutdown. What they're not thinking about are what are the consequences to this country if we fail to act. You hear now that there's some additional conversation about maybe another one-week continuing resolution. When is it going to be enough? We need to draw a line in the sand, because if we can't make these decisions today, how are we going to make the tough decisions in the future when we really need to address the big challenges as it relates to spending? And I saw it just recently, and I know many of you have been reading about it and hearing more about it, Paul Ryan, and I applaud him and the House Republicans who are supporting the Ryan plan, because that is bold leadership. Some Republicans have said we need to wait until President Obama and the Senate Democrats lead with a proposal. All that's about is political posturing. Now's not the time for those types of games in Washington, D.C. We need leaders who have the courage to say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done, even when it's not popular. And that means not fearing the risk of a government shutdown. Because if we allow the Democrats to demagogue and point fingers and call us names, then we're never going to be able to tackle these issues as they relate to Social Security reform and Medicare and Medicaid. Those are the challenges that we face to make sure that America's fiscal stability is restored. And I can share with you this. I don't know exactly how many years we have to address these issues, but time is running short. Every year that we do not address these problems, it gets exponentially more difficult to try to solve these problems in the future. That's why we need people in Washington right now who have the experience and who have the courage to say no, who have the courage to stand up, sometimes definitely to the Democrats, but sometimes even to those within our own Republican Party. Because the $14 trillion debt that we face right now isn't only a fiscal mess for our country. Our national debt has now become our nation's greatest national security threat. Because we cannot keep borrowing from countries that do not share our values and interests. A lot of that money that we borrow is from China. And every time that America cannot act on the world stage in our best interest and take moral leadership, I would submit to you that we have effectively lost our sovereignty bit by bit. Now, I would also share with you too that this nation is currently being led by a president who believes that it is better to fit in to the rest of the world than it is for America to lead it. And you saw it just recently with his action, or I would say lack of action, lack of clarity, lack of setting out a purpose and an objective, and lack of consulting Congress for that matter, as it relates to intervention in Libya, or I think he calls it kinetic military action. Some might actually call it war. But the reality is while a lot of people are trying to figure out whether this is some type of Obama doctrine as to how America is going to intervene in situations like this, I think it's actually quite hypocritical of this president, the same president who criticized President Bush in Iraq and Afghanistan, now acting only based on UN support and Arab League support, whereas President Bush certainly had a much broader coalition and congressional support before he took action. But the reality is that there is an Obama doctrine, and that is of engaging our enemies and distancing America from our allies. And it is making us less safe, less trusted, and less respected around the world. We must restore a national security platform based on the Ronald Reagan philosophy of peace through strength. Now, Ronald Reagan, many of us in this room are big fans of Ronald Reagan, and he certainly made that America is safer when America is stronger philosophy look very easy. He embodied that ideal of American exceptionalism, and he projected that strength. But I think Ronald Reagan would even agree today. You cannot fight an enemy when you are not even willing to admit that an enemy even exists. And today there is an enemy, and that enemy has a name and a defined mission. That enemy is Sharia-compliant Islam. And we cannot allow political correctness, multiculturalism, or appeasement to cripple our defenses at home or abroad. Because this is a threat that not only exists on foreign soil, this is also a threat that exists from those who seek to destroy us from within. Now, many of us saw just recently Congressman Peter King holding hearings in Washington about the radicalization of the Muslim population here in the United States. A lot of people ridiculed Congressman King for speaking out about this issue. A lot of people said that this shouldn't be done. They were outraged that he was having a hearing on this issue. What outrages me, what I think outrages you, is that it took nearly 10 years from the attacks on this country before we even started to have this conversation. Or another example of 2 American servicemen in Germany murdered in the name of jihad. And this president has said nothing. I can tell you that I am tired of the belief that it's America's actions that cause that type of activity and that type of ideology and that type of philosophy. We do not cause that, and you are seeing it now with recent events. We cannot allow that type of mentality, that type of belief system infiltrate and be insinuated here in the United States, because Sharia law is not compatible with the Constitution of the United States. Because we have unalienable rights given to us by our Creator, we're guaranteed the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it's important also to remember that America's economic prosperity, our strong national security, and our foundational Judeo-Christian principles are interwoven and inseparable. Some, even within the Republican Party, some of our own within the Republican Party, suggest that now is not the time to have a conversation or to discuss so-called social issues. But if Republicans aren't going to stand up for the sanctity of life, for the institution of marriage between one man and one woman, then who will? Because these social issues, the deterioration of the family, the breakdown of societal values, that is what has caused this dependency society to grow and continue to expand and try to solve the problems through government that we know in many ways can't be solved through government. And so for some, many of the messages that I'm talking about, whether it's the challenges that we face and the solutions that we have to offer as it relates to our economic challenges and our budget and our spending, or the threats on national security and the threats of Sharia-compliant Islam, or social issues, aren't very popular to talk about. But these are the things that I believe people are ready to hear. They're ready to hear the bold truth. They want to understand what the challenges are, and then more importantly, they want to understand, they want to know that we have solutions to fix these problems. The reality is that the bigger we've allowed America's government to grow, the more freedom we have given up. And we have to always remember that America's exceptionalism is based on the spirit of the individual, not the power of the state. This is just one of those times in our nation's history, whether it was at our founding, or whether it was during the Civil War, or whether it was during World War I or World War II are other inflection points throughout our nation's history where we must fight through and persevere. We need to be strong in order to do it. We need strong, courageous leaders in Washington. As I mentioned before, we need reinforcements in 2012 who can go to Washington to help get the job done. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I opened an exploratory committee to challenge Bill Nelson for the United States Senate. And I can tell you this is not going to be an easy challenge to undertake. I know that even within the potential candidates and the announced candidates from the Republican side that will face off in the primary, I'm going to be outraged and outspent. I know that some of them are going to try to reinvent themselves as conservatives in 2012 after years and years and years of fighting against the conservative agenda. Why? Because now it's actually popular to be a conservative. The good news for me is that in 2012, I don't have to reinvent myself as a conservative. I can go out with the same passion and the same energy that I have every year prior and talk about the issues and the challenges that we face. But I can't do it alone. I need your help. If you are looking for another voice, if you are looking for a strong voice on economics, if you're looking for a strong voice on national security and on social issues, and who is going to stand up and speak out and challenge on these issues even when it's not popular, I would ask you to join me. I'd ask you to go to adamhasner.com, visit our website, join us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, make a small contribution to the exploratory committee so that we can continue to travel around the state and make sure we get this message out. Because we must make sure that we defeat Bill Nelson in November of 2012, that we make sure that Barack Obama is a one-term president. This is where it begins, in this room and in rooms just like it, around the state and around the country. We need your help. I look forward to working with every single one of you to fight to restore America's promise for today and for future generations. Thank you all so much. I'll be more than happy to